This is the only video tutorial to build one of these on the internet. I've looked. All with basic tools. And if you're okay with the square base, you can buy just some 3/4 inch square dowels and are alright with the trunk that looks like that. These are the only tools you need to build it. And to build a more pinkies out version, we're going to need 2 jigs. And I did all that with a bandsaw and a sander. No lathe. Free plans included for the trees, the jigs, and everything else I build here on the channel. Hey, what are you building? It's a fancy version of a trivet, or a trivet tree if you Google it. A trivet is an object placed between a serving dish or bowl, or I guess a water bottle, usually to protect the counter or tabletop from the extreme temperatures of the pan. Don't go grabbing any wood. Due to the nature of what a trivet does, there are a few species that work the best. Poplar, cherry, purple heart, catalpa. Never heard of that before. Black walnut, and maple. Who typed the prompter this morning? Was it Jerry? Jerry's our new hire. I don't need to say the word wood after poplar wood, cherry wood. It's redundant. I just cut them out. Cut it. Walnut is an excellent material to use for these trivet-style kitchen hot pads, since it is relatively durable and typically does well in response to variations in humidity and temperature. It's also the only wood on that list that I had readily available in the shop. So for the trivets, I'll be building them out of black walnut, and for the base and upright stand, I'm just going to use oak base to match the oak dowel rod that I could buy readily at the store. Not too good at math, so I have to add an extra board. These take a scrap wood amount of material, a 6" by 6" cutoff for the base, a 12" cutoff of dowel rod. They just happen to sell it in 36" pieces. And for the trivets themselves, you just need 3 36" 3/4 by 3/4 square dowel rods. Why they're called dowel rods, I don't know, because they're square. It's just a piece of wood at that point. Stop calling them dowel rods. But I can achieve that using some of this thinner scrap just to get rid of it, and then finish off what I need from this longer board after I give it a better straight edge. The only thing I did not have in the shop was elastic banding, and Hobby Lobby's got options. I don't know the difference. I don't get it. So we're going to play with both of them. They have round cord elastic and beading cord elastic. The round cord elastic says great for making buttonhole loops and to create, it's the word fathers, but with a G, gathers on clothing. Great for crafting, sewing, and DIY projects. This one, beading cord elastic, designed for stringing beads in clothing where a light amount of stretch is needed. I think it's this one, the beading cord elastic. But we're going to find out. First, cut your material to 3/4 inches wide. My boards were stock mill thickness, so I cut them to be a perfect 3/4 by 3/4 inch square. Or a square dowel rod. So dumb. So I don't get it. I'll be building quite a few of these, so I cut some additional pieces. It's also easier to pre-sand your boards now, before they are cut down to the size of your finger. My main focus is removing the burn marks. I'm going to take a break from trivets for just a moment because I'm pretty excited to build the contraption that actually holds the trivets in place because of a cool little trick I've never tried before. Print out the bases. There is a printable plan in my plans. If you guys don't want to download the plans, they're free. It won't ask you for a credit card, not once. Took me a couple payment options to figure it out. But if you guys want to bypass that, find a round object and find the center of that round object, about 4 inches, 5 inches in diameter. Cut around the object does not have to be on that cut line. That does not matter because it's waste and kind of makes it harder to cut around. I've also been stealing the wife's Crafts Bond Elmer's stick glue. It's apparently repositionable, but it sticks down super good. Lather it on, and when you guys get done with your project, it just peels off like, I don't know, it peels off really nice. Can't really say it peels off like butter because I've never peeled butter before. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Before I carve this ham for dinner, I am going to drill out the center holes because if you cut out your material and then try to drill your hole, I can guarantee you that your handheld or your drill press will choose violence. It will spin it around. It'll try to cut your hands up. That's not what we want here today. Now, if you guys have a Forstner bit set, 1.25 inches, because that is how thick our dowel rods are. Otherwise, 1.25 inch hole saw kit. This is the cheapy $30 one you can pick up at the big box store. I picked this up as well. I actually came home and I was like, oh no, because I used to only have like 6 sizes of hole saws. And I came home and I was like, oh man, I hope I have a hole saw to match this, because it's a 40-minute drive to go get a different dowel rod. And I do. So I have actually the hole saw kit. I have the Forstner bit set, yada, yada, yada. Put a sacrificial board underneath your material, clamp everything down, and drill out your holes. If you're not holding your drill with perfect precision and you have a 3-degree wander as you drill into this board, people are going to notice. Luckily, our tree is only 11 inches tall, so maybe you can bend it into place. Cut out the circle with your jigsaw or bandsaw. Just grab a magnifying glass and start burning around that edge until finally it gets all the way through the board. And if you guys do not have any tool to cut this into a circle, that's all right. Just cut a little square base. It'll look just as cute. And if you guys wish to add a decorative outside to the base, now would be the time to do so. Don't do anything to this hole. I'm actually using removable carpet tape. It's a lot cheaper than 3M. I'm going to show you 2 different variations to make the trunk for our trivet tree, because if you don't own a bandsaw, you could still 100% make this project if you just left the base square or cut it out with a jigsaw. So there are 2 different ways you can go about making the trunk. And the trunk is actually tapered, so it's thinner up at the top and then it gets kind of wider at the bottom, and that stops the trivets from falling all the way down to the base. So you can achieve this with 2 pieces of dowel rod, or we can do it on the bandsaw in a minute. To do it with just some wood and a drill, all you need is a thinner dowel rod. This one is a 5/8 poplar. I don't have any oak smaller dowel rods. And then our 1.25 inch thicker dowel rod that we have purchased. First, we need to find the center of our dowel rod. And you can do that just by putting down a board and tracing around it like this. Just drawing a bunch of little lines. We are not anywhere close to the outside. And that gets you much closer to the center spot than if you kind of just guessed. And it's a lot easier to guess on the little baby circle than the big circle. Now we know where the center is. Clamp that down, hold it, get yelled at by holding it, don't matter. 5/8 Forstner bit to match that. I drilled about 1 inch down just to give it some bite, some room that I can glue up. Put your dowel rod inside of there, and bada bing, you have a tapered piece of dowel rod. And you can just take your sander, gently sand this. There's also a cool thing we're going to do on the belt sander here in a little bit. Just get this tapered down. It will pretty much always have a trivet down on top of it, because unless they're using all 3 or 4, however many you're going to build up, that's what we have. And I left it at 9 9. It is not going to be 18 inches tall, but I left it at length because I don't know how much room the trivets are going to take. I don't know how far they're going to hang down yet. In the plans, this will have dimensions, but I'm not sure yet. So I left mine a little long. We'll kind of fix it back in the end. So if you glued it up, you could always cut these later to your size. Don't forget, it does go on the bottom. So you lose this board thickness. You lose a 1 inch thickness for this dowel rod as well if you're doing maths in the garages. But if you're someone who strives for perfection and precision every single time, we're going to have to build a jig. And to build that jig, I just grabbed 2 18-inch pieces of scrap wood. One is a little bit bigger, but when I slice and dice, it might actually fill the space up. And if it doesn't matter. It's a pretty simple jig. Now, the smaller board I have, all we're doing is just cutting it at a 45-degree angle on the table saw, pretty much near the center of the board. With the 2 45s facing up, creating a V, I line it up at the end of one of the boards. I don't want it centered in the bottom because I might need to add a clamp down the road, depending on what application I'm using this for. So I want to allow for clamping space. Glue and nail it into place. Back at the bandsaw, I set the blade to be about 3/8 of an inch to the left of the lowest part of my V. I had it 2 inches into the material. That's how the jig is shown online, and that's how I looked it up. But as I was making these cuts, small pieces actually got wedged in between the crack behind my blade, and it's a pain to get those out of there so you could get it off of your bandsaw, because obviously it doesn't cut in reverse. And I had to use a scraper thing to even just get the jig off. It popped my whole blade. It was a thing. It doesn't matter. Trial and error. With that, I also threw a speed square on here just to make sure everything is square and level best that I can. And all we're going to do is just run our board through and slightly turn it, run it through until you get one of these. Actual circle though. So it'll make a smaller dowel rod inside of your thicker dowel rod. And we actually need to go at least 6 inches into our piece. So this little guy is going to definitely get a workout at its thickest. We're looking at pretty close to 1 inch thick oak running through our baby bandsaw. And that's all right. She'll take it like a champ. We've reached the point where now all these little extra cutoffs are flopping down and pinching the blade when I'm trying to run through again, because it's becoming a hot mess down there. And maybe you could fix that by scooting the jig in. I'm just going to cut them off. So I'm going to run around this blade and then just kind of slowly inch my way back in until I get all these little fingers removed. So I'm going to replace the jig again, just lining it up with that little bit of blade spot that I had before. It is nice to have that little blade spot until you've used the jig a couple dozen times, and then you don't know where your little cut line is. But you could always just trim off the little bit that you cut into the board. Pro tip. So clean it up, get everything almost looking finished nice. She's getting there, but we can do better, because this, see this nice gentle curve profile? I'm just gonna push down until this touches almost the top of my belt sander and give it a nice gentle round. Hit it! I'll get it. And just look at that beauty. No lathe, bandsaw, and my little belt sander. Made a beautiful dowel rod. Tapers up. I really wanted to give it like a little concave spot right here, kind of like it could bump in, be decorative. But I was like, no, because this was kind of hard to keep straight. So keeping this straight would definitely be a challenge. And again, we're going to cut it down to size once I know how big to cut these down. And we know the size of the trivets. And speaking of trivets, the trivets right here, these are going to become trivets and trivets. Trivet, Travis. Ha ha ha! How long have you been here? Get out. Get out of here. The whole time? For the trivets, let me tell you, it's not what I was doing yesterday. 16 times 22.5. I hope to goodness gracious me that it's 360. And I guess it would make sense that the 22.5 degrees would be the exterior angles, because we always make the border of an octagon. I never make the center of it. And from what I can find out, the dead center of an octagon, because I Googled what's the interior angle of an apple pie, because it's 8 slices. They said 135 degrees. So I'm going to guess I'd be in a completely different place if I'd paid attention in geography. And I'm still bad at math too, so it doesn't matter. But to figure out this angle, what I actually did was I hand doodled all of my pieces, and then I brought them over to the miter saw, and I started cutting up a board. And 45, then I had I don't remember, a 45 and a 22.5 degree, 22. I had a board, I'm trying to figure out how to get the angle, not even to be the number that it's supposed to be, just to get it, and I'm like, you know what? That matches up. Like, literally lining it up and looking at the blade and being like, that's good. So don't ask me what any of this means, but I can tell you how to get there for this simple jig. I know, it's another jig. I'm sorry. I didn't know it was going to take this many jigs. I wish it didn't. I wish this was simpler, and Wouldn't have wasted all of yesterday. Very simple jig. If you guys wanted to print out, I have a nicer looking one of these in the plans. Print this out. You can draw them onto your points, cut them out on a bandsaw or however you want to do it if you don't want to make a jig. Very simple. For this is a 22-degree angle. Smack this board against your saw, 22.5 degrees. Then you're going to take this board, you're going to smack it against your fence because it's not attached yet, 22.5 degrees. You don't even got to change the angle. 22.5 degree. I took a board, I put it right here, making this nice and straight. Then I clamped this together. When I clamped it together, I bet I already threw it out. Yeah. Using this cutoff scrap piece, and I clamped her down and I glued it. I threw a Kreg screw in it. This is a normal, 1.25 inch. This one's actually a 3/4 because it's really close to the edge. Who knew? And I drew this line on the top because where it lines up, that's like the tip. That's where my blade would make contact. Instead of running the piece all the way to the bottom, because it's going to cut off that 1/2 inch of waste. Hello, a quick off-camera realization. If I'm using this line to make it so my blade hits perfectly in the center of this without a lot of waste, if this moves because, I'm taking it on and off to make the other cuts, now it's not there anymore. So mine actually perfectly works out to where I can line it up with this edge. If you guys don't, and you're going to be making a lot of cuts and you have to remove your jig, I would, once you have it set up, just make a quick tick mark in here so you know where to reset this when you go to make more cuts. Might save you a little time. To use the jig, I set my saw to 45 degrees to the right, and that just makes everything easier to cut. You could flip the jig around if you are left-handed. I'm right-handed. With this, what you can do is actually secure your board with a clamp because the blade comes nowhere near here. If you want to hold it, you can. I'm using a clamp so I don't get yelled at in the comments, but I usually do it without a clamp. So clamp this down, make your initial cut, flip your board over, and then again, I line it up with that line about a 1/2 inch in, make my next cut, then I have a point. Then I cut both ends of my board to that point. And that's why I have this test piece. It's because I can put it up against the point. I can draw in how long I need these so that they all match, and then I can cut on that line. And if I cut to either side of that line, it's not a big deal as long as this is always a constant. If I was using this piece that, I've cut 8 of them and now I've been to the right side 8 times, you might see a difference if you're cutting, 32 of these out if you're making it 4 tall, 24 if you're making it 3 tall. So I just make a test piece, easy peasy. And to get that cut straight, you can take the entire jig off of your miter saw. You could also just head over to the bandsaw. Oh, no, you can't. The bandsaw's got stuff on it too. If you guys have to do the tedious task of taking the jig off, setting it back to 0, making a straight cut, and then resetting everything, just know, do it to all the boards at one time. So cut all of your points and then go through, chop them, not all at the same time, but one at a time. And then you'd have 10 pieces done instead of doing it to this board, resetting, doing it to that board, resetting. And just work your way until you have no more board or you feel uncomfortable with how close it is to the blade. Another tip is that with the boards that we have cut, I thought all of these were 3/4 of an inch, but they are unfortunately not. They are about a 1/16 inch longer on one side. And if you line them up like this, these are all my cut edges, this is the one I didn't cut, there's a lip. So what I like to do, make sure that they all match and then just draw an X on one of those. So with the jig set up, I just leave the X facing up, line it up, make a cut, flip it over, make a cut, do the same thing, X, cut, cut. And then I know that they are all going to be the exact same height without me having to do a lot of sanding later on, because I just don't want that pot to wobble. I want it to be firm, and I want it to be a nice product in the end. So without further ado, I'm going to get the rest of these tricycles cut out. You're so bad at this. Again, I muddled through the prototype stage to bring you content that is less head scratchy. And we've done it, people. We finally have a prototype, very static moment. Here it is. It does scrunch up just like in the picture. You put your hot water down on it, maybe a pot instead. It scrunches down. Mine do not automatically, there's sawdust everywhere. Mine does not automatically scrunch up on its own. So, you know, it has that little bit of bounce in it, and that's adorable. You pop this bad boy right on the tree. It hangs out on its own. Again, we'll cut that later on. And what I ended up doing to build this is I took all these little scrap pieces, all of that wood that I had cut up because I made some errors yesterday. I'm able to get 2 complete trees plus this one branch thing and one other one that would be half oak, half walnut. So take your little pointy piece, again, 4 inches long. I drilled a hole just to the side of where our little points are. I don't deal with trying to drill it into the points. I didn't want to do that. It works out perfectly just like this. It's actually down to the side. You'll see that here in a moment. So drill that hole in. I am using a 13/64 drill bit. Just get something that's smaller that your elastic fits through. And my elastic. I actually did not like the beading cord elastic. It was not as stretchy as the round cord elastic, and it's a little bit thicker, and it has a little bit more stretch to it than the bead cord. So I'm using round cord elastic. That's the winner for me. That is what I used for these. So all of these, I'm going to get this hole drilled into them. Then we're going to move on down to the sander. Here at the sander, you are going to take all of those little trivet arm pieces that we have just drilled our holes into, and I'm going to do all of it here in a moment so you can see it start to finish. I'm going to take this, gently round it on these long edges just to get them, you know, so they're rounded, so it's easier to handle. It feels nicer when it's in the tree form. I'm going to do the same thing to the backs. I'm going to just kiss them real quick on here, get it done. Then I am going to sand most of this tip off. I don't want it to be sharp. I don't want a tip on here. You see it here in a moment. I'm going to get most of this gone by just rounding it off on the sander. And then I'm going to put a lot of pressure down to sand it so I remove a lot of material till this is flat in the sander. And that is so when it bunches back up, it's not straight, because then they don't want to form into a circle. So I'm going to remove that, making it flat. And you'll see me kind of rock it back and forth because I do want to remove that other material where they touch and make a circle so that they all kind of bunch together instead of being these kind of square blocks that we still have right now. So here we go. And it really does not take very long. So, rounded these edges, rounded the back edges, still have my hole, cleaned up the hole a little bit. I did forget to tell you where the point meets. I do kind of give it a gentle buzz right there just to get rid of that point. So, kind of almost looks more like a crayon. Buzzing off this bottom piece right here. And then you can see it carried around to the sides, so that way they can all bunch up together. Now, we're going to just repeat this 24 more times per tree that you're building. You could, make one that looks like this and has all the pieces, in different order. And when you hang them, you could sequence them. Could be kind of cool. I'm going to make all of mine match because I'm kind of a square. Back to the sander. It really looks like all you need to do is where your hole is drilled at. These little corners in the bottom need to be sanded way farther down, so that way they kind of rock together instead of just being pinched in a spot. They can rock together, and then it pulls that elastic in closer so you can get it tighter. I'm not a scientist. Simple observation. Thread them through. Make a fence. Tie them in a knot. There's that little beautiful upright little thing I'm looking for. She's very close right there. Let's see if I can get her tighter. Okay, that's pretty tight. Again, I'm wasting a whole bunch. That's all right. Yeah, that's the ticket. It's not as uprighty as this one, but this one actually springs back like they do in the commercials. Where does this need to go? And then wherever this knot is at, I'm just gonna trim it. Leave about a 1/4 inch just because if it loosens or something, I don't want to see it. And then find a different spot, kind of pull on that elastic, and it will tuck this inside of one of these so you don't see it at all. And there it is. I like that this one is more springy because this one stays down. And in the videos, you know, they put the cup down and then it comes back up. These are fun. Wrestle some elastic until you have all of your little tree parts. I put 3 of them on each one of the trees. That's what it looks like they have online. And as for the base, haven't glued it down yet. To the bottom of my little piece right there, I've got 3.5 inches. So 3.5 inches for the top, from that little base to the bottom. We'll call it 7 inches. 3.5, 7 inches. I did not need to cut this near as long as I did. This one you can buzz off on the miter saw. This one I did end up using a smaller handsaw because I didn't want to be cutting it and then it, like boom, and ruin all my hard work. And it just goes down in here. You glue it into place. Throw your little tree things on the top. Kind of stagger out the little branchy parts. And there it is, people. The object the internet's been shoving in my face for months. One more quick thing. You will want to add a natural oil, beeswax, shellac, mineral oil, tung oil, food grade safe polyurethane to the top of these. Even just like a butcher block sealant to the top. Protect the wood. Also, you know, protects everything else, stops it from getting extra moisture and different things like that. And shellac is delivered from Indian lac bugs. Ugh.